Well, growing signs that China is worried Evergrande's debt crisis is undermining the property market. Well, the central bank has urged financial institutions to help stabilize the sector. And that includes easing mortgages for some home buyers and avoiding any sudden halt to funding developers. Now, Beijing wants to avoid a crash in the market, which is cooling rapidly, but it has vowed not to use the housing sector to stimulate growth. China's home sales slump widened last month, hitting the lowest point in more than a year. Credit ratings agency Moody's warns the property slowdown and Evergrande's credit troubles will hurt local governments, and that in turn is likely to weigh on China's economic growth. Well, Evergrande, the world's most indebted developer, missed another debt obligation this week. And today, it began paying a small portion of the money owed to buyers of its investment products. This came weeks after people protested against missed payments. Hello, Min Min joins us live now. Min Min, let's pick up on that payment on the wealth management products. What is outstanding, and will this payment placate thousands of investors still out of pocket?
Well, they have made a 10% repayment on wealth management products, but these are largely owned by onshore retail investors. What's more significant is that they have missed out for the second time in less than a week payment of offshore bond coupons. Now, offshore bondholders are saying that Evergrande has remained silent on its debt obligations, and that's worrying investors who fear that they could face huge losses when the 30 days grace period come to pass in a month's time. Now, Evergrande has been known to prioritize its domestic creditors over its offshore bondholders, and experts are saying regardless of how its debt is going to be restructured, those holding on to bonds, offshore bonds that are in USD denomination, they will face huge losses given that Evergrande is already struggling to meet its obligations in its home markets.
Min Min, at the same time, China is taking action to protect the broader property market. How important is this sector to the Chinese economy?
Well, the People's Bank of China, which is the central bank today, said in a meeting that the financial sector must stabilize land and housing prices. It must resist using the real estate market as a short-term economic stimulus. It also said that houses are for living in and not for speculation. Now, that is a clear signal of the authorities' concern about the repercussions of an Evergrande default on China's property market. Evergrande is, after all, the world's most indebted property developer, and is expected to face one of the largest restructuring in the country.
And, you know, it's been weeks of twists and turns. What is the sense among the population about how bad things are?
Well, Evergrande's debt obligations now is about 2% of the country's GDP, but analysts are saying that Evergrande alone is not too big to fail. But if you take into consideration the entire real estate market, that is indeed too big to fail. China's investment in real estate makes up about 1/5 of the global the country's GDP, and 70% of people's wealth are tied up in home ownership. And so if an Evergrande collapse leads to a confidence run on the entire real estate market, that could pose a systemic risk to the national and even international economy. But many analysts still believe that a contagion risk would be ring-fenced to a few institutions with direct connections to Evergrande and to a few weak developers. Beijing has so far been unwilling to bail out the company, but the central bank has vowed to protect home buyers' interests. They're worried about protesters, and so even in the event of an Evergrande collapse, the government is likely to still step in to help individuals. They might be forced to broker a partial bailout of assets most connected to social stability, and this would focus on those properties that were pre-sold by Evergrande to ordinary people but are not yet built. And what this could look like is that these projects would be carved out, divided, and given out to a few smaller companies who would keep the projects ongoing, in effect bailing out suppliers and contractors.
Well, thanks for that. Lo Min Min there, live in Beijing.